Welcome, everyone. We're here to talk about virtual tutoring that works. We're going to be dispelling myths and sharing best practices. I'm your moderator, Jim McVetti, and I'm so delighted to be joined by Elizabeth Diamond, Lizzie, as you may call her if you like, as well as Emily Hunyadi. They're both from a group of school group called FirstLine. I'm really excited for you to see the work they've been doing in their public school systems in Louisiana. Before we dive in, I want to just take a minute and give a special shout out to the underwriters of today's webinar, and that's On Your Mark Education. And they exist specifically to close the literacy gap. They're in the business of teaching kids how to read and write. They focus on building foundational literacy skills, and we're going to hear about some of their work with Lizzie and Emily. Mostly it's the Lizzie and Emily story, but we're excited about supporting nonprofits like On Your Mark Education because they partner with schools to strengthen their existing literacy instruction. Okay, and they focus on tier 2 and 3 students by providing high impact virtual literacy tutoring to students throughout the school day. So it's pretty awesome. I really encourage you to check them out. We'll have some resources for you to take a look at in just a few minutes. First, let's get to know your expert educators. Well, starting with you, Lizzie. I've been talking a lot, so I'd love for you to say hi, and who are you?
Good morning. My name is Lizzie Diamond. I work for FirstLine Schools. We are a charter network of 4 schools in Louisiana, and I am the K-2 network content leader. So I work with a lot of principals and teachers, and Emily is one of the principals I work with at one of our schools.
Yeah, nice. Well, so glad to have you here. So delighted. And Emily, who are you?
What a great introduction. I'm Emily Hunyadi. I do work at a school that partners with Lizzie. We're part of the same network. I came to teaching in 2nd grade and kind of bounced around in a couple of different grades. But I've discovered that I really love being a principal because I get to work with all the kids and all the teachers. And I'm really excited to talk to you about tutoring today.
You know, it's interesting. And I hear it in Lizzie and I hear it in you, Emily. Whatever title you have now, whether it's organizing K-2 literacy initiatives across multiple schools or serving as a principal, I'm guessing that you identify first and always as a teacher. I mean, I just feel like that always comes up. And for those of you listening in, whatever role you have, if you're in the classroom on the ground day to day, or if you're working with a network of schools, I see you, I recognize you, and I know you're all teachers at heart. And that's why it's such a delight to be here with you. Lizzie, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about FirstLine Schools. Talk about the network of schools, who you serve, and what it's all about.
Sure. We are in New Orleans. We serve 4 schools. We have about, I think, 3,000 students-ish. We're a charter network operator. We are a fully charter district here in New Orleans, and we have been running schools for 20 years. And so we've been doing this charter thing for a while. And our 3 of our schools go K-8, and then, 3 of our schools go pre-K through 8th grade, and then 1 is kinder through 8th. So we have a lot of little kiddos, and we've been diving into doing some virtual tutoring with them this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that deep dive. But before we do that, Emily, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Langston Hughes Academy, where you're currently the principal.
Sure. So, fun fact, we are the first fully rebuilt school post-Katrina, like new construction, which was really exciting. We do serve our youngest kids pre-K, and then we go all the way up to 8th grade. So we get them through their whole educational journey. Also, Lizzie was talking about folks' dogs in the beginning. Fun fact about LHA is that we have what we call an animal husbandry program out in our garden. We've got about 10 chickens and 3 goats, and we used to have a pig, but I'm hoping to get one again soon.
Do I want to know what happened to the pig? No, probably not. We can move on from that. But that's an amazing piece of trivia that you have an animal husbandry program in your school. And by the way, for those of you who are amongst our international friends from India, New Zealand, and a range of other countries, just a little background context that FirstLine is a charter school. So it's a It's a managed school that is publicly funded. So we're talking about public school system with kids who come from, I would guess, a variety of backgrounds. And a good number of those, I'm also guessing, since you're a first rebuilt school, is some of them come from low socioeconomic communities and maybe don't have all the advantages that you might find in other schools. Is that a fair picture? Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
Okay, good.
accurate.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's important because one of the things that, in talking about the myths of high impact virtual tutoring is that it's only for a certain kind of school or a certain type of setting. And I think that's one of the myths that we're going to work against here today as we talk about what works. And in dispelling those myths and sharing best practices, we're going to cover a few topics. And I see folks still logging in. We're so glad you're here. Beverly from South Florida. Michael is a special education teacher from Queens, where my dad is from. So good to have you here. Here's our agenda today, though. Now that we've done a little bit of warm up, a little bit of getting to know Lizzie and Emily, we're going to talk about the need. What's driving this this effort to really walk towards the issue of literacy performance? We're going to look at those myths around virtual tutoring. I mean, there's a lot of teachers and there's a lot of school building operators from here around the world, and you need to know, like, if this is coming to your school, you need to know what it's going to be like. Or if you're part of a community inside your school that's looking for resources, this is a good way to figure out, what you're going to get. So we're going to talk about the best practices that Lizzie and Emily were using, and we're going to look at some of the measurable outcomes. That is really key. So we have a good agenda in store here for us today. Now, Lizzie, I'm going to point to you because big picture, across the country here in the US and arguably around the world, when we look at reading scores, such as here in the US, the NAEP scores, which is a national assessment of progress, wasn't that good. It wasn't really good. So this is some commentary here. By the way, folks, when you're back in your hometowns building a case for bringing on additional resources, we'd love to have these slides ready for you to help build your case. You'll be able to access them via on-demand views. And if you're listening in via our podcast, what we're showing is a summary of the NAEP scores from 2024, where as a nation, at grade 4, we were 2 points lower than we were in 2022, and we were 5 points behind where we were in 2019. And we've shared commentary from NEA and from Gallup that talk about the frustrations that we're seeing in the fact that we're not getting these scores where they need to be. So Lizzie, I got to ask, were you seeing this as well across your schools?
Oh yeah, totally. We're feeling some of the general challenges of, serving a lot of disadvantaged kids, and we have a lot of gaps to make up, but also COVID gaps, and this we're always trying to figure out more ways to reach everybody, and it's hard when you have a whole range of kids in your class that go from I don't know my letters yet to I'm ready to read chapter books, and how do you meet everybody's needs in the middle is the challenge we're always working on.
And Emily, when you're walking the halls of your school, you're seeing that same thing, I would think, where kids, it's a really good way to paint that picture, Lizzie, of kids who don't know their letters to ready for chapter books. What's that been like as you walk the halls and poke your head into classrooms?
I think Lizzie described it pretty well. It's like it is a big spectrum of what kids know and are coming in with and are capable to do. And then I think that is a little bit of a cause and effect of some of the other things that you mentioned in your slide around, like, teachers are working really hard to address all of these needs, and that gets a little tiring. And I think also if I'm a kid and school is hard for me, that does tend to lead to lower engagement. Or if I'm a kid and this is really easy for me and I'm cruising along, that also leads to low engagement. So there's a lot of your three columns intermix with each other.
Oh yeah, that's really important. I mean, thinking about engagement, we're actually going to talk about a measure of engagement in this work, and the numbers are pretty promising. There's probably nothing so disheartening as a bored classroom of kids who are staring off into space. So I can imagine that you're trying to pull out all the stops to work against that. Lizzie, you mentioned post-pandemic, like COVID happened, and Emily, you talked about the fact that teaching and learning really is harder than ever. So one of the summary points here is that we really do need remediation, but that's not the only thing we need. You also need growth. So Lizzie, when you started to understand, hey, we've got a big need here, and like I'm air traffic control for literacy at K2. So did you think about it in terms of remediation and then growth, or did those things kind of come together for you at the same time? I'm just curious how you think about those things together.
I mean, definitely a heavy emphasis on the remediation component in the last couple of years, but I think we've been, now that we're 5 years out of COVID starting, we've learned a lot of lessons around, trying to both remediate and grow, and really figuring out how to meet every kid's needs. And ideally, we remediate, and then those children who are remediated then grow from
Ooh,
there forward.
yeah, they need that foundation. And you know what's
Mhm.
interesting too? It didn't really show up in the NAEP scores summaries that we provided, but this was all happening kind of right at peak science of reading shift. And I have to believe you're nodding, Lizzie's nodding. So as I'm saying, and Emily's nodding too, as I'm saying this, like we've got all this stuff. We've got, kids coming from a variety of foundational levels in terms of knowing their letters, their blends to full chapter books, different, socioeconomic status. But then you've also got this shift for science of reading. So I don't know. I'm just exhausted talking about it. I can't imagine having lived through it. So more power to you. I'm curious, and I see a couple questions, so I will acknowledge those. But while we do that, I'm going to ask for a quick poll because we talked about remediation and growth, and hopefully the producers here. Yep, there we go at edWeb. God, they're amazing. We'd love to hear from you about how your school's currently using tutoring. What's the emphasis? Is it on remediation, enrichment, fueling that growth, or is that maybe you haven't implemented yet? So that's fine. We'll give it just a few minutes. In the meantime, let's see. Emily, I'll point this one to you because Bethany says that it seems like class size would be a component of both remediation and relationship. How's your class size situation unfolding inside Langston Hughes Academy?
Sure. So we have between 25 and 30 kids in a room with one teacher, and then at different parts of the day, an assistant teacher or a co-teacher is able to join and support. I staffed it as most during the literacy block as I could, again, because can sometimes feel like one adult playing whack-a-mole with a bunch of kids' brains, and that's not a great feeling. So yeah, I think that's really true. So as much as you can like personalize and get kids in small group attention, the better it's going to be for them.
Yeah, that can't be easy. Lizzie, when you thought about this process, were you thinking about that teacher-student ratio, or were maybe you were just doing the best you could with the resources you had?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always open to new resources and ideas, and particularly ones that are going to take things, off of a teacher's plate. And in this particular case, our experience with virtual tutoring is like it's a very short amount of time for a child in a day, but they're getting it every day with the same person. And so we know that when you have really good material and really good direct, and the instruction is very clear and the kid gets to practice, that you can do a lot in 20 minutes a day. And so having that as an option when we know that our teachers are trying to meet so many different needs was appealing for us to try and add it in.
Yeah, I'll bet it's interesting to watch these numbers kind of settle in a little bit, with remediation being a key word here, not too dissimilar from what you two were looking to address, because until you remediate and rebuild that foundation, you can't really work towards growth or enrichment. So I find that to be pretty interesting, and a decent number of you have yet to implement. So I'm glad you're here because you're going to learn about best practices, whether it's with On Your Mark or any number of providers out there. I think it's important to understand, what are the myths going in and what are some of the practices. So let's start with some of the myths here. I think we have queued up. I'm going to close the poll, and let's talk about the myths. So the first one is actually building on a keyword I think that Emily, you mentioned, which is relationships. So the myth is that you're talking about a virtual experience, a little bit like we have going on here. Two folks, different states on a screen, and the myth is you can't really build a relationship that way when tutoring's done virtually. But some of the science is saying otherwise, and certainly some of the outcomes that we're seeing, and we'll show you later on. But Lizzie, I gotta imagine relationships was a really big deal for you. So tell me about this myth and how you've come to kind of blow it apart a little bit.
I mean, it's definitely something I, asked a lot of questions about and was curious about at the beginning because we, as I'm sure anybody who's been around 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, engagement on the computer can be quite limited if it's not interesting or, they will find other things to do. So I think, getting them invested to the point where they, want to participate and want to learn and want to do the things. And I think, part of the relationship component that, and it says consistent here, piece that I think was really appealing was it's the same tutor for the whole year for each child. The child is the same tutor for the whole year. And so that like it just makes such a big difference when you're only seeing them for 20 minutes a day. But as somebody who's not in classrooms every day, but in classrooms very frequently, I can see the kids are having a great time. They're all laughing and doing the thing and learning, but they clearly have relationships with the people that they've been working in. It's April by now, so they've known these people they've worked with them every day for months. But I do think it goes a long way, particularly with younger kiddos, particularly with kids that like might not be doing so great at reading, and having the confidence to try and learn new skills is important to feel confident and safe in that space.
Yeah, confidence is a really important word in that early literacy space. I mean, it's so intimidating, especially in a classroom where kids are of mixed abilities. Some of that confidence erodes pretty quickly if you're on the struggle bus, and this setting with the right relationship, that confidence really seems to come up. Am I onto something, Emily? I mean, I'm improving here, but I feel like Lizzie mentioned
You're nailing
confidence
it.
twice, and that well,
Yeah.
that really just seems to kind of like be important. So, how are you seeing that confidence emerge through the course of relationships?
Sure. I think speaking to like Lizzie's initial like hesitancy about like what is this going to be like? I think during COVID we had tried a lot of things for the computer that were very one way, right? Like I watch the video and then I fill out the sheet, or like I do this game thinking it's supposed to be fun. But once kids realize, like, oh, this is a two-way interaction, like someone is listening to me and responding to me, and this is something I'm doing together. They were super invested in it. They want to log on. You could hear them laughing and having a good time. And I think we're really lucky to have tutors that like take time at the beginning of each session to be like, hey, before we get started on the new stuff, let's talk about this thing, like what's your favorite kind of pizza, or like what did you do over the weekend, so that kids are comfortable and realizing like, oh, this is a thing that we're working on together and this is someone who's here to help me.
Well, I like those examples because we're talking about the impact of virtual tutoring, but you're really reinforcing the human element of this whole exercise, and I think that's critically important. And I see from Michael, and I want to acknowledge the comment that yes, every classroom is a classroom of students with mixed ability, and I think that's a fair point and a good push. Like there isn't a classroom out there that is that is not composed of highly diverse learning needs, starting points. So all of this really does play an important part. Shifting gears a little bit, another myth that's out there, and it's so funny because I don't know how much you've seen these slides in advance, Emily, but you talked about the concern that maybe Lizzie had going in is like, we tried an awful lot of things. We tried games and videos and whatever could keep them connected. But the concern around virtual is that it's just extra screen time. But what I just heard you say, it may have been intentional, maybe not, this is not just sit and get. This is highly engaged. Um, Lizzie, how did you figure that out when you went into this movement? I'm just thinking about like, man, how do you go and find the thing that gets Emily and her teachers what she needs, which is kids highly engaged, hitting big attendance numbers, which we'll talk about, laughing and smiling and talking about weekend plans and pizza. Like, how
Yeah,
did you make sure that this wasn't going to be a passive experience?
I mean, we did not go out and seek it. This was gifted. I was here. You are the person that's gonna, foster this relationship. Great. What is it?
You're
Now, when we learn
volunteering.
about it, yes, so I can, explain it to the school leaders, and they can go forth and explain it to teachers. We are lucky in that we have a lot of funding currently from the state for this, and it's a statewide initiative to provide tutoring to a lot of children. So knowing that this is not the only option out there, we've had other tutoring partners in our schools, both in person and virtual, like really looking at what that piece of the same tutor every day was huge for me because I don't, um, we have our kids have a wide variety of needs, and I think the consistency is really important. I think there's also something that they specifically talked about on Your Mark. Other places may do it as well, where it's not one-on-one, but it's two-on-one, so that kids have like a buddy to play games with. And like for a spectator, it does look like they're playing games most of the time. They're all word games, they're all reading games. They're grouped and paired based on the data that we provide from the beginning of the year. And so it's like very targeted for those kids' needs. But I do think having a buddy as well makes it, a safer place for a kid to get on and talk to a stranger on the computer.
Mm, that's interesting. I guess I wonder if the conventional wisdom going back to when this whole virtual tutoring movement first started, I wonder if the conventional wisdom was like, hey, if we talk about teacher to student ratios with, more students to fewer teachers being not so good, maybe we should work towards that one to one. But Lizzie, you're telling me that, sometimes one to one's great. Sometimes the two to one actually works really well. Is that what you're seeing, Emily, in your classrooms?
Absolutely. I think it has both like an academic and the social emotional benefit. Like you're able to do just like slightly more rigorous activities when it's 2 to 1. They can give each other feedback, they can respond to each other. And like it is a safer space. It's a little bit less scary. And I'm getting to know this adult on the computer and a classmate, which if we like, go back to what we were talking about earlier, like how kids are feeling at school
Mm.
in the like engagement piece is always a question like, hey, here's a friend that I've had specific time with in virtual tutoring, and I go back to class with that person, and that is like a relationship I built kid to kid as well.
Yeah, well, that really does make it uh, an interesting extension of the importance of relationships, because it isn't what I'm learning, and this is why I take notes, is it isn't exclusively about the relationship to one student with one tutor. Now you're actually creating this very cool triangle where the students are forming a new kind of relationship, which I think is a really interesting takeaway. So thanks for busting that myth for me. No, it's interesting. We talked about and we took a poll on why do people get into this thing anyway? Like, what are we really after? And that is principally driven by remediation, right? Like the NAEP scores at a national level, and everywhere you turn, we're concerned about getting kids back up where they need to be. Uh, but we're also finding that it isn't just about remediation. So we're going to go into some data, but Lizzie, we touched on this earlier. Um, like what's happening here with this myth about remediation going away? I mean, this is so interesting to me that there's so much more happening.
I mean, yes. And what's very interesting is because of what I mentioned earlier about our funding and our parameters around that, we are very prescribed as to which children can we put in tutoring. So these are children that have made tons of growth, both because of their wonderful classroom teachers, but also in part because of the tutoring they're doing. Because we only can put in children who are scoring in certain buckets, namely the bottom two buckets, from our state testing. And so, the enrichment piece to have kind of like organically come about as kids have made progress throughout the year. And again, they're still in tutoring, that like they're in it for the year, they're in it with their person. So seeing that change and growth is kind of happened organically and not something we necessarily, I certainly did not expect going into it at the front end for the first time this year.
And what about the lasting results? In fact, I'm going to go back. Look at this. This is interesting. So, in your experience at FirstLine, I'm looking at this bottom section here, where tutored students, and you mentioned they fit a certain learning profile. So they started at below or well below benchmark, but by middle of year, 20% had already progressed into at or above. So that's some serious results here, which I think is pretty fascinating. But also, coming back just 2 more slides, I find this stuff so fascinating. Part of that is driven by the fact that kids are showing up. We're going to see some other attendance data here, but kids are really showing up for these things, which I think gets to Emily's point, which is whatever program you put into place, it has to be one that fits your school and aligns with what you're after, but also has to really demonstrate the relationship pieces there, and that it is about more than just sitting and playing a video, and it gets to really creating that foundation for growth. I heard a story recently about another school, and actually I think they were using On Your Mark, I'm pretty sure, where after the first year, maybe 2 years of tutoring, a certain student was continuing to show signs of growth, even being out of the tutoring context. Does that make sense? I mean, Emily, you've got some kids going through. Have any of them kind of graduated yet from tutoring and back in? Or maybe Lizzie, you've seen that across schools. Maybe I don't know what I'm asking here, but I find this so fascinating. Like, you're setting them up for success so that they can do it on their own. Are you starting to see that yet?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think we haven't pulled anybody out of tutoring because we want to have results that stick, especially with like our kindergartners. We saw a really strong and exciting beginning of the year, like kids who were coming in with very little concept of like letters and the like, what is this squiggly line with a stick? And then by the middle of the year, like, yep, I'm cruising. I know their names. I know their sounds. We don't want to then take away support, right? Like if this is a thing we know works for this child, we want to continue to give them that. And I think what's kind of exciting is like, it's a little bit like not that they're rocks, but rocks rolling downhill. Like once I have skill and confidence and see I can do it, I do the things more that keep giving me skills and confidence. And then I keep doing more of the things that build my skills and confidence.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great metaphor for momentum. I mean, that's what you're building here, and that's what you've done across the FirstLine community, and Emily, within your school as well. One side note, it's worth commenting. A couple of folks in the chat have talked about their experience as tutors. So they loved one-on-one tutoring because they could build that relationship. And as Winifred just mentioned, when they were shut down during COVID, that person had done a little bit of virtual tutoring. Loved it. So I think it's pretty satisfying that we've got a community of educators here. And of course, we're honoring the importance of moving students forward. But man, there's something really nice to say that the tutors love it too. So it's pretty gratifying. Just wanted to acknowledge that. So while we're feeling good, though, it is a level of effort. You've got to put the work in. So let's talk about some of the best practices, including when you're talking about high impact tutoring, that hit word there, high impact tutoring, the non-negotiables. So Lizzie, I think I used this phrase earlier, air traffic control for this work. So talk about what were some of your non-negotiables going in, and how have you carried those forward into practice at places like Emily's school?
Well, my non-negotiables have probably changed from this year to next year.
Right. Fair enough.
One of mine personally for our schools, because we are small, we only have 4 schools, having the same kind of structure for tutoring. So when we started the work, and I will say, like, On Your Mark as an organization, and again, I'm sure others are similar, like very clear with time expectations, leader, involvement expectations, teacher involvement expectations, student involvement expectations, and like we get a lot of information from them. So I feel like very well supported, and like I don't have to seek things out. Don't worry, I have an email from Jen almost every day that tells me everything that's going on. And it's, I mean, as the Air traffic controller, I don't necessarily do anything with them. The school leaders do most things with them, but we're getting a lot of information. So I think like structure wise was something that was important to me at the beginning of like, on your mark, kind of laid out, here are some options that our folks that we partner with do. We have blocks of time where we have small group reading instruction happening in our schools. So we went the route of, cool, when you're not in your small group in class, your tutoring time is over there when you would normally be doing independent work. Some lessons have been learned. Might not do it quite the same way next year, just because kids are constantly growing and changing reading groups, etc., and it makes it not quite as easy to change them, move them around when they have a tutoring time and a place to get to. But I think a lot of that, like, structurally was on my mind going into it, and really wanting to make sure that I wasn't adding a whole bunch more onto leaders or teachers' plates, because they already do about 4 million things an hour. And so, really looking at what's the value add for the cost of it. And every turn, this seemed to, the value add was quite high for the fairly, passive experience that a teacher has to have on a regular basis. Kids, at this point, in a classroom, my experience is somebody's phone alarm goes off and looks up and says, "Jim, tutoring, go." And the kid goes and goes. And like, that's the teacher's involvement for the most part. Once in a while, somebody's headphones don't work or whatever. But for the most part, low lift. And it did take a little while to get everybody, particularly with kindergartners. Took a little while, but we got there. And our kindergartners have benefited more than our second graders in tutoring. So we've seen a lot, like, for all of the headaches it caused at the beginning to get our youngest friends logged on and their headphones on correctly, they have soared with it. So I think the cost of what teachers and leaders have to put into it versus what we're getting out of it is a big deal.
Yeah, it's so interesting the way you talk about the intentionality of your structure. And sure, you're going to refine things year over year, but it's not like you threw out your whole script for the school day. You just found the pockets where this could fit in. So maybe in lieu of independent study, which is maybe a scenario where some kids weren't intrinsically motivated, maybe lack the confidence to go forward on their own. I mean, that's a natural place to insert this. And, Emily, you dipped out, but you're back. I'm glad you're here. How did you see this woven into the school day? Because that is a fascinating element here. So that's one question. But the other question I think that comes with that is, Lizzie was responsible for communicating this, like, okay, it's happening. But you're the one also getting questions from teachers like, wait, you want me to do what now? So just to unpack that a little bit further, Lizzie's talking about, like, an alarm goes off, go. That is such a sign of trust that a teacher says, go for it. But Emily, how did you get them there? Because it didn't happen automatically. I got to believe there was some skepticism coming in.
Sure. And it's interesting that your middle bullet is about building trust and and then the third one is about a commitment to shared ownership. I think what was really helpful to do, the trust came with the shared ownership over student outcomes. Here in Louisiana, we have gone full in on dibbles. Our teachers are like really invested in their kids' ORF and their ability to like read and decode those three little CBC nonsense words. And so knowing that tutoring was really aligned to those same goals built a lot of trust, because teachers could see, I'm doing this work, they are doing parallel work, and our kids are growing because of the combined effort was really trust building. And like, so it was like, okay, I want you to get on your tutoring time because I'm seeing the results, and it's results that I really care about for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, what a great segue into talking about those results. What I'm going to do is actually, for sake of time, we can talk logistics, but I think we've covered the challenges. And I think what I want to do is talk about the metrics that matter. So you mentioned you went all in on dibbles. And and that was a departure maybe from what you had done before, or like when did that start to emerge, that adoption of dibbles as a matter of standard practice?
Um, I I think in our transition over to science of reading, we'd had a couple of
Mm.
years in like the land of Orff. We are in year 2 of Dibbles, as like the state of Louisiana says, this is what everyone in Louisiana is going to do. Lizzie, correct me if I'm
Okay.
wrong.
Nope, that's it. We did, if anybody's familiar, AimsWeb, very similar probes, very similar session. And yep, state of Louisiana said, hey, we are going heavy on science of reading, and everybody's going to do dibbles, and everybody's going to have this same platform, and then that it works beautifully because we all have the same data, and this the tutoring company receives the same data, and then they use that to design what the skills are that each kid needs.
And is it fair to say that Louisiana is doing a pretty good job overall? We have a question actually that came into to me on the side channel about like what's going to happen with the funding cliff now and ESSER and machinations at a federal level. Seems like though Louisiana, I
Those are
mean,
great questions. We would love the answers too.
that's
Um,
right.
if I'm being
Yeah,
totally transparent.
yeah. So it's a
Excellent
little.
question. We don't know.
But but in that answer, like Louisiana is going as a state that is not typically super well funded in education. They have put a lot of money towards early literacy in the last couple of years, and so yeah, if we did not have that, if the state was not working on that initiative, we would not have virtual tutoring next year because the cliff is massive. But the state, it is a law now that children below grade level in certain grades receive tutoring, and Louisiana loves to put a law in place and then maybe fund it. We're just very lucky that this one comes with funding right now, and so um, that actually seems to be increasing from what we've heard from next year. And a lot of schools are still in like the deciding place of like, are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? What company we're going to use? So it's possible we have quite a bit of funding next year, but I think the benefit, even if there's a very small amount of funding and you can only do a certain small subset of kids, we still see a lot of benefit of it because of the individualized, like very data-based work that's happening. And we're just very lucky that currently we have the funding.
And there are
Yeah,
some
I
ways
mean,
that
I
you
think
get a good value for your money versus like we've been lucky in years past to hire in-person tutoring, and then there's like a person that I've hired and trained and figuring out how do I stretch them across multiple grades and multiple groups of kids. It's nice that there seems to be a very large pool of virtual tutors who are available at all kinds of parts of the day. When we use an online platform. So there are some places where I'm like, wow, this is a really nice value.
Oh, I will add something to what Emily just said about the structure of it, like because that a school leader, I'm sure everywhere in the country deals with like figuring out coverage when teachers are out on a fairly regular basis. So that was On Your Mark has an entire internal system. I don't exactly know all the ins and outs, but I do know that if a tutor is not there, they have a sub that fills in within the first 5 minutes. Um, and kids aren't just left hanging. So again, another like, this is not the school leader to figure out who's subbing. It is just going to happen. Beautiful.
oh yeah, that's interesting. That's not something I
Which is a
knew
lovely
before.
perk.
I never thought about that. I mean, yeah, life happens, and sometimes you get a no-show unexpectedly. So having that coverage is pretty important. A question that came up in the side chat, and again, feel free to click on the question icon and send me questions directly. But Lizzie, one that came up was, um, what is a good time of day, and how long are these sessions really supposed to be? Can you just talk
Mhm.
about that? Because we touched on these topics, and I'd like to put a finer point on it for the person who asked that question.
Yep. So with On Your Mark, it's 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week. They do not do it on one day. You can pick what day. We just happen to do Fridays because as an organization, that's when they do professional development with their tutors. So they're looking at all the data from the week and planning. Again, that was another big selling point of like, this is not just go tutor these kids, but they're like actually coming back together to do some data analysis and plan their instruction for the following week every week. And knowing that like that structure's there in the responsiveness to data was really promising. But yeah, it's 20 minutes a day. We again, we did it during we have differentiated reading blocks in all of our schools. Some people did it differently. Emily can speak more. Um, learned she had it spread out a little differently, and I think we've all learned lessons in different arenas as to like best time of day. I will say the like most logistical issue that I think we ran into in terms of time of day more than anything else was two of our schools start at different times than the other two, and so the early start schools tend to have a lot of tardy kids because school starts very early, and so putting things like at 8 a.m. didn't go so great because a lot of kids were not there yet. So in terms of like the pure logistics, that's kind of the biggest thing that I think we've learned in terms of time of day, but Emily might be able to speak more to like how do you orchestrate it within the classroom itself.
Lizzie is being very kind because she's laughing at what she could have done is laughed at me because I thought kindergartners should tutor in the afternoon, and learned that that was probably not best practice. Our second graders tutor in the morning and our kindergartners tutor in the afternoon. The good news is because it's 2 to 1 and it's one adult that could put out the bells and whistles of like, everybody's a little tired, everybody's a little bit more distracted. We could make it work. But if I had the chance to do it over again, or as I look ahead to next year, I would probably put my littler kids earlier in the day when they're a little fresher.
Yep, that makes sense. That's lived experience for you. The key thing is that it's showing good progress. In fact, I'll come back here and revisit the data that we touched on earlier, because when we look at metrics that matter, and we're talking about three big ones here: quantitative assessments, DIBELS being your state's preferred data set. We're going to talk about student attendance, like getting kids to show up, and so maybe the littles will switch to the mornings next year, and the older ones will be in the afternoon. And of course, getting that feedback, just the teacher buy-in is going to be key. But it's interesting. We touched on this before because it seems like it's working. I mean, you had kids below or way below benchmark, and now they're getting up to, at, above, or well above. And where am I going with this? I mean, the fact that it's working, and it's working within the year in which you're delivering instruction. So Lizzie, Emily, you're doing a great job because you've got this program moving the needle by middle of year. Why is that important? Well, I'll tie it back to the funding question. Schools are going to find a way to fund the things that work. And if you're showing results mid-year on any number of measures, from certainly performance metrics related to DIBELS, student attendance, are they showing up for this stuff? And then our teachers bought in. It's a really good way to work against some of that funding pressure. I know that because I've been in this space, for 25 years now, and I've watched all manner of products and services and solutions come and go. It's the ones that move the needle in a given year, they're the ones that are going to be around for the next year. And speaking of being around, student attendance has been a key metric. Was that on your radar coming into this work, Lizzie? Like when you first set out, well, I guess thinking back to your earlier comment, you were voluntold, hey, this is happening. So was that a measure you were looking for, or did that just come organically to figure out, tracking of the student attendance? How did that take shape for you?
We have, and I think this is a nationwide issue. We have a lot of attendance challenges post-COVID that we're still dealing with, and it does tend to be more isolated to the younger grades. So that's always a concern. I think my personal biggest concern going into this, thinking about the attendance in the schools and some like work that I did in the first couple of weeks and months, was like, okay, our friend Jen at On Your Mark gives me the attendance list. We get a daily attendance. I mean, the information comes in. Anything I could ever want to know as to what's happening in tutoring, I have it at my fingertips. And then I was taking it and comparing it to the actual attendance in Power School. Like, who was actually not here today and who just didn't make it to their tutoring session, so that I can connect with the school leader and the teacher and figure out what's going on. Are we missing headphones? Are we in a different space than we're supposed to be during that time? We need to move their time or whatever it may be, but doing a lot of problem solving to ensure that the path could be cleared for teachers to, ensure that kids were on without having to stop everything they're doing and go help everybody log on.
Right, because if they're not there, they're not learning. And yeah, we could have an endless number of edWeb webinars, and I'm willing to bet inside the edWeb community, there's a lot of commentary and content about the overall attendance issue facing schools across the country. But Emily, you're getting it done. The kids are showing up. But I think also what's interesting to me is that the teachers are kind of showing up here as well. So you're getting qualitative feedback, and there's some really fun quotes here about the partnerships team, which is service oriented and responsive and respectful of the team's time. It's funny because there's just such an element of service to this whole thing. I mean, it's really not a product that you've adopted here. It's more of a, I guess it's more of a service. Is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's very clear to our teachers that our tutors want the same things that they do for their kids. They want our students to be academically successful and happy at school. And it's very clear to our teachers that like our tutors are working very hard on those things. There's a lot of respect for like, oh, I can see that on Fridays you are analyzing your data and coming back more prepared not that they were unprepared, but coming back even more prepared the next week. And then again, when you see results, teachers are like, this is a really helpful partnership because we want the same thing. We want our kids to be successful and our kids to be happy and like feel like that is happening in tutoring and getting a lot of like communication of like, this is what happened. This is how it's going.
I know we're all about improving educational outcomes, but there's two big words in there that just want to shine a light on: feel and happy. Like, it is a feelings business that we're in, and we want kids to be happy. And I would just argue that, you know, what I'm hearing is one of the ways to help a kid feel confident and feel happy is giving them the skills they need to be successful in the classroom. And that's going to carry for a long time. And that really matters because, you know, you want to make sense of these metrics. And so for those of you listening in here live from around the world via the on-demand views across the edWeb platform or in the podcast that this will become, you have to do something with those metrics. So looking at FirstLine's, you know, success and the work that Emily's done, there are principles out there of practice in terms of how to implement these things with rigor, with validity, to get the kind of outcomes that they're doing. Now, in an ideal world, we would clone Lizzie and Emily and we'd put them in every school everywhere so you could work with them, but we can't do that. So instead, hopefully you'll be able to find partners that can help you in that work. So as we wind down, we're going to open up another quick poll. You've been really good about asking questions here. We want to know, like, are there any other burning questions you have or topics that you want to cover in the last few minutes about virtual tutoring? We're looking at funding, staffing, curriculum alignment, other logistics. There's a lot going on. And Lizzie, you've adopted the air traffic control mantra that I offered up before, which I think is pretty important because it is a lot. It is a lot. Seems like
Emily?
funding is going to be key for a lot of folks. Is that a constant worry for you, Lizzie?
I mean, with this particular thing, not currently, because, this came about because we got the funding. It wasn't the other way around. So, and, we're in a lucky position right now in Louisiana where this is heavily funded. I think, if we were looking at continuing and didn't have that situation, then, we would probably have to start looking at, other cuts and other things because, we use plenty of other blended learning programs. And when I look at like where's the value add of Lexia versus tutoring, we love Lexia, but the kids we're not seeing the same progress as we are with tutoring. And so I do think like, if we were in a position where we weren't lucky to have the funding for this specifically right now, that would probably be where I would look first. What are the other blended programs? What are the things we're already spending money on? And like what is the most valuable here?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. That really echoes a number of themes that we just mentioned. And by the way, for those of you who are interested, and it's interesting, a number of you are keen to live the tutoring lifestyle, to become tutors yourself. So if you want to learn more about that, I think, and the producers on the back end can tell me, I think you would go to onyourmarkeducation.org, and there's lots of information about what it takes both to adopt tutoring within your school setting, but if you're an educator out there looking for becoming a tutor, that's probably not a bad place to go as well. So, um, so thanks for the engagement. Let's talk about the big takeaways here. So we came into this call and we were joined by several hundred of you from around the world trying to dispel some of the myths. And the 1, 2, 3 here is that when structured intentionally, it really works. And Lizzie, I've heard you say that over and over again. Like you've been intentional about your structure. Doesn't mean that you're rigid or that you're not willing to flex a little bit. Likewise, Emily, maybe shifting some timetables, but it really does work. I'd summarize the other takeaway: relationships and the alignment to the way you do business is really important. That relationship kind of sits at the center of this whole thing. And of course, data being data, we have to have it if we're going to find continuous improvement, whether it's middle of year or end of year benchmarking. That data is really the thing that's going to offset some of these other pressures, the funding, the teacher constraints, all the things. So those are the takeaways I was hoping for. It looks like we got them. Emily, any kind of closing comments, big takeaways that you want to share? Maybe something we didn't cover that you want to slide in before we start to wrap up?
I think you've hit all the big things, except that, I mean, I would just reiterate it again. As we've had a lot of different versions of what does tutoring or intervention or remediation look like in schools, how do we go about providing the best education for our children? I have been like really pleased with our experience this year. It's been low lift on our teachers, which is always lovely, with high impact. Like we see the results, and what more could you ask for?
Yeah, low lift, high impact. I mean, that's the dream. Holy cow. Um, Before I forget, I want to invite you all to find us wherever you look for folks. So there are links available for following Lizzie on LinkedIn or myself if you're interested. We're so glad you're here. Lizzie, any other big takeaways that you want to impress upon?
I mean, I think we've captured it all. It's just very pleasantly surprised at how well this is working out, and we're really happy to have found something that, like Emily said, is a low lift, but we're getting a lot of bang for our buck, and it's ultimately getting us all towards our goal of all of our kids reading above and beyond grade level.
I think we could all use with some pleasant surprises here in education. Uh, I mean, we should have more of those. So the pleasant surprise being low lift, high impact is delightful. On your screen, there is an instant download for a guide to high impact tutoring. There's a QR code that shows up here on the screen. If you're listening in via our podcast, simply go to onyourmarkeducation.org. You'll be able to access all the materials you need. Lizzie, Emily, thank you so much. We're so glad you could be here. It was just a fabulous day. And I'm looking at all the comments here, and man, we cover it. Really. Thank you so much.